my throne back, you know, like the division's scattered at the moment. There's belts everywhere. But I was on the trajectory.
Hey, what's up? This is Antonio. Welcome back to my channel, and who's ready for some fighting words? In this video, I want to talk about Tim Tszyu and his return to the ring. Really quick, if you like the videos, please take the time to subscribe to the channel if you have not already done so. If you have, thank you. If not, please do so right now. You have a great opportunity to do it right now. Just click one little button. Also, please hit that thumbs up button. It does help. It shows love and it supports this channel. Why are we talking about Tim Tszyu? Because there has just been a lot going on with him lately. Not necessarily him, but just change of opponents. So he was originally scheduled to take on Erickson Lubin. That fell through. It was more on Lubin's part. He didn't necessarily feel like he wanted to go to Australia. I don't really know why, but he didn't really feel like he wanted to go to Australia. Maybe he felt like he's not going to get a fair shake. Whatever the case may be, he's out. Then we go to Jesus Ramos Jr., which would have been a crazy fight. That probably would have been fight of the year. I actually made a video about it. And, you know, unfortunately, that fell through. But Christmas has come early for Tim Tszyu. Why? Because he's going to be taking on Bakhram. And the IBF has made Tim Tszyu the main man to step up and take on Bakhram. And that means he gets to fight for a title, and that means he gets some leverage. You know, it was long ago. He just fought Fundora. He came up short on the short end of that stick, and now he's back, and he can possibly get a title shot. In which case, that doesn't put him back at the top of the heap, but now he's back in kingship table status. He's sitting with the rest of the kings who have the straps, so it gives him some leverage. So I figured, you know what, let's do this fight breakdown. And I'm going to start this thing off right now. I'm going to start off with experience. I actually think Tim Tszyu has more experience. Not necessarily that there's a difference in the amount of fights that they both have. Tim Tszyu has 24 fights, 1 loss, 17 KOs, while Bakhram has 22 fights, 16 KOs, no losses. But it's the opponents in which they face. Like, that's really what's more telling. Bakhram has guys in there that's 9 losses. And I'm talking like 2020. I'm not talking like the beginning of his career, because that's okay if you fight a guy who has 9 losses. But not in 2020. I don't know why you're fighting a guy like that in 2020. So when I look at who they both have faced and beaten, and, you know, Bakhram was expected to beat the guys that he beat. You look at Tim Tszyu, he's not always expected to beat the guys that he beats. But not only does he beats them, he demolishes them. He steamrolls these guys. So I got to give it to Tim Tszyu. And he has Tony Harrison on his record. And I'm going to keep saying Tony Harrison, because Tony Harrison beat the guy who was the guy. That was Jermell Charlo. Tony Harrison clipped him. Yes, Jermell revenged his loss. However, he still did it. And Tim Tszyu made even shorter work of Tony Harrison than Jermell Charlo. So that's saying something. Durability. Both of these guys are pretty durable. You know, Tim Tszyu's been down a few times. He jumps right back up and he just mollywops people. Then you have Bakhram. He's Russian, so he's already tough. You know, now I am kind of looking at people in terms of regions. I'm like, he's from Australia. They don't produce weak people. He's from Russia. They definitely don't produce weak people. So therefore, this is going to be a good fight nonetheless. I actually think, and hear me out, I think this fight is going to have a semblance of both Jose Ramos Jr. and Erickson Lubin, in the sense that Bakhram, he's a very tough, durable guy. And he's foundationally, he's solid. He's a very solid guy, foundation-wise, in boxing. Great jab. Great jab, like Lubin. And then, you know, he's a good body puncher, like Ramos Jr. So I feel like you're kind of going to get a little bit of both of those guys in this fight. But I'm sorry, this is a much better fight for Tim Tszyu. And if I'm him, if I'm in his camp, I'm definitely telling him to take it. I think one of the arguments is, you know, where is this fight going to be held? It's going to be held in Australia. If I'm Bakhram and you want the best bang for your buck and you want to get the most out of this fight, I would suggest that you have it in Australia. One, there's a whole market of fans that you could possibly have. Also, you're going to make more money in Australia than you're going to make anywhere else. Bakhram does not have half the name that Tim Tszyu has. Tim Tszyu has lineage with his name. Bakhram does not. So it makes more sense to have it in Australia. But if I'm in the camp of Tim Tszyu, I would say have it wherever this man wants to have it as soon as possible. Let's just have the fight because we're confident that our guy can win. So let's just have the fight and we'll give him everything, contractually speaking, that he asked for, so there's no more holdups in Tim Tszyu's career. That's what I would do. Especially, when you feel confident that you're going to win, it doesn't really matter because I'm walking out with the belt anyway. So yes, the next fight's going to be in Australia. We're just going to have to take this one in the chin. No bad. Let's see. Boxing IQ. I'm going to give this one... I might have to give it... all right, so like I just said, it's because of the opponents that they both face. Yes, so you would give it to Tim Tszyu. However, you're talking about, a guy who's Russian, and he's probably had 4,000 fights, amateur fights. So in terms of experience, I'm just going to say it's a tie. Because you look at these guys from Eastern Europe, and they've got a ton of fights under their belts. Okay, and anywhere else, the guys that they're fighting in the amateurs would be pros. So you got to be honest, and I have to be fair. So they're just going to be even. I'm going to say it's a tie when it comes to boxing IQ. Power, it's also a tie. Tim Tszyu has 17 knockouts. Bakhram has 16 knockouts. That's also a tie. I think both of these guys possess the power to clip each other. However, I would say Tim Tszyu has gotten up. I've never seen Bakhram in a situation where, he just goes down and, he's stumbling all over the place and then he collects himself and then he cleans the floor with the guy in front of him. I haven't seen that scenario yet. I'm not saying he doesn't possess that. I'm just saying nobody has presented that situation to him as of yet. In which case, you got to go with Tim Tszyu when it comes to power, in that sense, because when he starts his guys, they don't get back up. You know what I mean? They don't get back up. Actually, you got to give it to them. They don't get back up. I mean, like I said, Bakhram has power. Yeah, I got to give it to him as well. So, like I said, it's just gonna be a tie. It's only fair. Speed, Tim Tszyu, hands down. Bakhram is not the fastest guy in the world. Bakhram is the guy who's consistent, and his consistency is going to give you a problem. His consistency is going to be the headache for you the night of. It's not going to be his speed. It's going to be Tim Tszyu all day. He's a lot faster. And it was even Tony Harrison who said he's a lot faster than he looks. And Tony Harrison's a fast fighter. His whole game is built around speed. Let's see, defense. I think both guys are sound defense. I think Bakhram has a little bit more sound defense. I mean, he hasn't been down, multiple times or rocked multiple times, and I think that's due to his defense. When you look at that Eastern European style, it's about volume. You better believe it's about volume, but it's also not about it's about not being careless and not placing yourself in a scenario where you're gonna have to fight your way out the room or anything like that. I don't think he's great at fighting backing up, but Bakhram does use his legs a lot of times in his defense. While you look at Tim Tszyu, it's all upstairs. He's kind of mauling and manhandling people, controlling people with his hands. Also, a lot of deflecting shots, and that's so that he doesn't lose positioning. But I would give it to Bakhram. I would give the defense to Bakhram. Let's see, mental toughness, Tim Tszyu. It's not that we can't say Bakhram doesn't have these things, but I didn't see Bakhram with a face full of blood and still beating up on Fundora. I didn't see that. I didn't see Bakhram go down, take an 8 count, and then beat the living daylights out of his opponent. I didn't see that. But I didn't see Bakhram get clipped and, his legs kind of go wobbly. He gets a little, uneasy, and then he collects his thoughts, and then he marches forward and he finishes guy off. I didn't see that. I have not seen that as of yet. I've seen that several times with Tim Tszyu. He's a soldier. He's a warrior. Mentally speaking, if I'm in the camp of Tim Tszyu, I would tell him you should act as if you're an undefeated fighter. In my eyes, he's an undefeated fighter. He wasn't beaten by Sebastian Fundora. He was beaten by blood in his eyes. And the only thing that really separated that, and I had a few people, message me about saying this, but I believe it's true. The only reason that Tim Tszyu lost that fight, we're talking a game of inches in that particular fight. 8 to 10 more punches, I believe Tim Tszyu would have won that fight. So mental toughness, I got to give it to Tim Tszyu. Hands down, I got to give it to Tim Tszyu. Not to mention, you're carrying the weight and the heaviness of this name with you. I got to give it to Tim Tszyu. A lot of people just don't like him because of his name. I got to give it to Tim Tszyu. You know, because mentally, it's not easy to push back past that stuff. You look at somebody like a Conor Ben, you could tell it really does annoy him when he hears you're not as good as your daddy, or, you know, you're only here because your daddy. It annoys him. You look at Chris Eubank. It annoys him. You know, it annoys him. You can clearly see it annoys those guys. You look at Tim Tszyu. He is so unfazed by that. Like, he is so unfazed by that. Mental toughness, Tim Tszyu. Body work. Both are good body punchers. Both are good body punchers. This one, actually, I think I'm gonna give this a tie. I think both of them have good body punch. Here's the thing with Tim Tszyu. He's a single shot type of guy. He likes to just place one here, you know, just because he's storing up for later. While you look at somebody like Bakhram, like I said, it's all volume. Everything is volume. Everything is punches and bunches. Because of that, you know, if I wanted to, I can make the argument that he would get body work. But Tim Tszyu stopped guys with body work, you know, with body punches. I mean, Bakhram has as well, but Tim Tszyu stopped guys with body punches. Stopped guy with one body punch. You know, so I'll still give it a tie, because slow and steady doesn't win the race, Tim Tszyu. But when you're machine gun punching, you can get a guy out of there really quick. You know, so tie. Versatility. I think Tim Tszyu. Because every time he fights, you see a different Tim Tszyu. You don't see the same guy. You see the same guy pressing forward, but you don't see the same punch selection. You don't see the same sequence. You don't see the same setup. When you look at Bakhram, I see the same setup. I see the same sequence. I see the same punches. He's going to be who he is, and you're just going to have to deal with it. While Tim Tszyu is versatile and he can mesh with other styles. Got to give it to Tim Tszyu for versatility. Footwork, Bakhram. But I could actually give this one a tie if I wanted to, and I'll tell you why. Tim Tszyu doesn't need great footwork for what he does. He's a stalker, and he's going to press forward. He's going to inch by inch by inch. So he doesn't necessarily need to have the greatest footwork. It's not as if in his mind he's going backwards. That's not happening. That's a non-negotiable for him. When you look at Bakhram, the Eastern European style is very light on his feet. And because of that, you know, he's always kind of balanced and kind of ready. He's definitely ready to go offensive, but he's also ready to go defensive. So I got to give it to Bakhram for footwork. What's the best range? I think Bakhram, if he stays on the outside, he's pumping that double jab like he always does. Everything is off the jab. I think he's solid. I think he's going to give Tim Tszyu a big problem. You're talking about a guy who really knows how to punch, and you're talking about a guy who is really accurate, and you're talking about a guy who doubles and triples up on his punches. So yeah, he's just going to be a problem the whole night. For Tim Tszyu, obviously, I think the best range is for him to get up close and personal. That's not to say that he can't fight on the outside. He's had to do it several times. But I think when he's up close and personal and he has the ability to manhandle you and throw those shovel hooks, and that uppercut from Tim Tszyu is through the world. Like, it's through, it can break through cement. I mean, his uppercut is ridiculous. So, up close and personal, I think that's the best range for him. Especially with Bakhram, you don't want to give him any unnecessary momentum if he lets his hands go. You know, and you want to close that distance as soon as possible. You know, somebody like Bakhram, he's pumping. Yeah, but if you close that distance, it's not that he can't pump that punch anymore, but he has to be real selective about when he's doing it. And Tim Tszyu is a great counter puncher. So let's see. Punch output, Bakhram. I don't even need to go into that. That dude's going to throw a lot of punches, period. Danger. Who's more dangerous between these two? You know what? I can't go by power because both of them have power. I can't go by durability because of where they're from. So the only thing that I feel that's going to separate these two guys is the mental. Now, you can look at Bakhram and say he's an undefeated fighter, and that is true. He's also the champion, and that is true. But I look at Tim Tszyu, and I just see a guy who's tried and tested. He's tried and tested. He's been through the fire. he's been through the fire. Again, that cut defeated Tim Tszyu. It wasn't Sebastian Fundora. After the fight, Sebastian Fundora is told by the Boxing Association, you got to sit down and recover. We're not going to allow you to fight. That wasn't happening for Tim Tszyu. It's just that his cut had to get stitched up and then it opened back up in camp. But he was perfectly fine. When they wiped the blood away, he didn't have a scratch on his face. It was just on his forehead. Like I've been saying throughout this whole entire video, Tim Tszyu's been down, gets back up, and he demolishes his opponents. So the mental of these two guys, and if Tim Tszyu is approaching this fight the way I hope he's approaching this fight, if I were in his camp, the way I would be advising him to approach this fight is, you're an undefeated fighter. You're an undefeated fighter. You were beaten by a cut. You weren't beaten by a man. You're an undefeated fighter. And I would drill that into his head. That has to be established in him. And I think because of that, he has more mental toughness. I truly do. I have Tim Tszyu winning this fight. I think, if I'm putting myself in his shoes, I would feel robbed. I was robbed by a cut. I was on an upward trajectory.
Tim Tszyu, Jekyll to the massive right hand.
It's
done.
It's done. It's done. I think if he comes into the fight with that fire, with not that vengeance fire, like I lost the fight, now I want to get it back. Not the vengeance fire, the undefeated fire, the fire that says, I shouldn't have lost that fight. If he comes in with that fire, his mental toughness is going to be through the roof. I think it's already through the roof. And I see his composure looking at his interview, just talking about, how excited he is for this fight. And he's just ready. And he's like, at this point, at this stage, and at this level of boxing, I'm going to have to fight all the tough guys anyway. Nobody's rushing to get to the head of the line to fight Bakhram. But for this opportunity, I think it's a perfect one. And I do believe it's one that Tim Tszyu can take.